At the start of the film, we immediately see a city in a very unsettling state. There's no one around, no life at all, and not a single human voice. It truly makes the place feel like a ghost town. But behind that eerie quiet, there's still a middle-aged man named Del. Del is the only person left standing up to this point. After a horrifying incident wiped out almost all of humanity, an incident we don't get exact details about, what's clear is that Del is completely alone, without a single companion. Thankfully, since he used to work as a librarian, he can rely on the library as a place to stay. Day by day, he spends his time in serene solitude, almost to the point where he no longer remembers what it feels like to interact with others. In fact, because there's absolutely no one else, Del has to exert extra effort to clear out all the bodies in certain blocks. From sanitizing each house, to moving every body he finds, to carefully burying them one by one. Whenever he finishes cleaning an entire block, that block is ready for anyone who might possibly live there in the future. Though who that might be, Del has no idea. All he can do is hope that someday he can form a new generation and prevent humanity's permanent end. Having no electricity is a major problem for Del. Every day, he must wait for the sun to rise before he can go about his activities. Thankfully, fuel hasn't become too scarce yet, so at least there's that. One day, Del wakes up from his sleep and rushes off to continue his usual tasks, but at that moment, he accidentally notices a car nearby that's already smoking, and inside it is a woman. Feeling pity, Del decides to bring her to one of the houses he has already sanitized. Deep down, Del fully realizes how dangerous it is to let a stranger stay. Dangerous for him, that is. Even when the woman says she has no bad intentions and was just passing through after a night of heavy drinking, Del doesn't seem to care much. He's been so lonely for so long that he doesn't want to get involved. So he instructs her to leave this area, even going so far as to give her a car to take. After she's gone, Del goes back to his usual routine. But unexpectedly, this mysterious woman continues to follow him around. She introduces herself as Grace and says she wants to stay with Del no matter how indifferent he acts toward her. She even offers to help him with evacuating each body, just so she can be more useful. Del remains unconvinced by her words, repeatedly questioning her motives. And yet at one point, he finds himself unable to turn her away in the middle of the night, unwilling to force her out again. From there, Del teaches Grace all the daily tasks she'll need to handle on her own, from evacuating remains to sanitizing every house. Beyond that, he even shows her how to bury the bodies once they're all wrapped and ready. Afterward, they visit a supermarket that Del has treated as his personal pantry. They can choose any food they want, though some of it has obviously gone bad. And it's not just a supermarket. They can stroll through any store they fancy, without anyone accusing them of theft. As evening comes, Grace returns to the house. Once again, Del asks her to head out and check a few remaining blocks. This time she must do it alone, following the same procedures Del taught her. But before she can really start, Grace hears strange noises coming from one run-down building. It turns out there's a dog still alive in there, so she decides to bring it back. From that moment on, day after day, the two of them share time together, including going to a silent lake to fish. Call it a moment of relaxation, especially since Del hasn't experienced a leisurely moment with another human in so long. Even with minimal fishing skills, Del still manages to catch a couple of fish, a special treat for them both. After nothing but canned food for ages, Grace and Del finally get to savor the real taste of fresh fish again. The next morning, the dog that Grace brought home starts acting out, tearing through the library's books that Del has always looked after. In that chaos, the dog bites Del, which leads him to let it go. Naturally, Grace is heartbroken to see this. She tries to convince Del to track the dog down, but he confesses he released it on purpose. Hurt by his actions, Grace feels completely alone again, left only with this aloof man. From the very start, she'd hoped to start a new generation with Del. For her, it didn't matter what Del's limitations might be. The important thing was building a new family, to continue life in some way. But Del just says he's used to being by himself. Even before this widespread disaster, people avoided him. Week after week passes as they go through the same routines, day in and day out. It's during this time that Grace starts learning how to fix various solar panels on each house, hoping to create a new energy source for future humanity. Before long, they've almost completely sanitized every block in town. Although there's one house in an area already marked off, that looks like nobody's touched it yet. Once inside, they find the remains of a woman sitting at the dining room table. That woman, it turns out, is Dell's mother, which explains why Dell never had the courage to sanitize this particular house. Eventually, however, he manages to gather his resolve and let go of that heartbreak. Together, they bury his mother's remains. Afterward, Grace says she wants to tell Dell something important, but before she can, the scene abruptly cuts to the next day. Dell wakes up in a strange home, confused, because he hears voices downstairs. More than just one or two. When he goes to look, he finds Grace and two other people, a man named Patrick and a woman named Violet. Immediately, Dell is crushed by Grace's apparent deceit, especially since Patrick and Violet keep insisting that Dell should just leave that house. Adding to the confusion, Grace blurts out that these two aren't actually her parents. There's no way for Dell to know whose story to believe anymore. Patrick's mention of a community is particularly perplexing. One last time, Grace tries persuading Dell to come along, saying that in the city center, doctors have developed a device capable of unifying people's lives to be as normal as possible, without any painful recollections of the past. Regardless of people's original backgrounds, they can all be brought together, united by shared contentment. But even that pitch doesn't interest Dell. He's more drawn to his quiet life, starting again from scratch. And on that note, he returns to the lonely routine he began on day one, this time without Grace at his side. Meanwhile, Grace has set off for the city with Patrick and Violet. After some time, Dell realizes he needs to find Grace. He sets out for the city Grace described, traveling a great distance which drains his energy. He ends up having to switch cars multiple times, resting on roadsides for 3 days straight. Finally, he arrives and discovers the city is indeed inhabited. Without hesitation, Dell slips into Patrick's residence in search of Grace. He finds her in a room filled with strange cables hooked up to her body. It turns out Grace has been forced to undergo the city's mass treatment, where memories of the past are removed to let people start fresh. Patrick and Violet, it seems, aren't locals or Grace's parents at all. They're just ordinary individuals, and none of them actually knew each other. When Patrick realizes Dell has found them, conflict arises. Grace ends up using a gun to stop Patrick, who had discovered their attempt to leave. Violet doesn't show much reaction, probably because she's only halfway aware that she isn't truly related to either Patrick or Grace. The next day, Dell and Grace make a quick exit from the city, taking along some ornamental fish from Patrick's place. Grace wants companions, and she's more comfortable with fish that won't bite Dell like the dog once did. At this point, Dell truly grasps why everyone in the city is perpetually cheerful. Their old memories have essentially been wiped clean, replaced with new ones that might not even be real. None of them actually know whether the people around them are truly family or strangers. In the final moments, Dell and Grace decide they want to start a family in a natural way, returning to their original town to rebuild a life together. Grace had previously visited this city on her own after hearing rumors there were survivors. However, she couldn't stand the place and returned to the original town. Unfortunately, once back, she found no one but Dell, who was always distant. That's why she eventually met up again with Patrick and Violet, who had been waiting for her. They'd hoped she would bring Dell along, in case he was also interested in joining them. But in the end, Grace's opinion of Dell shifted dramatically the moment she realized just how much he actually cares for her. In the end, the two of them go back to that quiet, abandoned hometown, intent on building a new and genuine life together. And with that, the film ends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Because by subscribing, you have supported me to make better videos. See you in the next video.